I have a complicated history with anime. Growing up, I was first introduced to anime when I watched Dragon Ball Z Kai on Nicktoons. I made it up to the start of the Cell Saga, and that's about as far as I got. For the next 12 years of my life, I never touched an anime again. Not because I was one of those anime is for nerds guys, but for the simple fact that every anime that I tried to watch quickly lost my attention. I've always loved animation as an art form, and as a result would go out of my way to try to watch anime, but I could usually never make it past the first few episodes. The way the characters acted and talked and everything about the whole anime culture just never really sat right with me, and I would just end up putting on something else. When I was 15, I watched the first season of One Punch Man, and to my surprise, I actually liked it a lot. For the first time since Dragon Ball, I was able to confidently claim that I liked an anime. It was a simple enough comedy fighting show that had a unique charm to it, but outside of a few quick laughs, I never found myself wanting to return to the show after the first season ended. Fast forward to present day, where I recently tried getting into One Piece, which, if you don't know, has quite a few episodes. One Piece was alright, but when I found myself burnt out and unable to watch any more of that, a friend of mine told me, if you like One Punch Man, then why don't you watch Mob Psycho 100? It's like One Punch Man, but with character development. My interest was piqued, so I checked out the show's intro, and I was confused, to say the absolute least. In love with the visuals, but confused. However, after seeing that the series only had 24 episodes as of 2020, I decided to finally commit to an anime and watch one all the way through. And upon reaching the halfway point in Season 2, came to the conclusion that Mob Psycho 100 was officially one of my favorite shows of all time. I thought the animation was jaw-dropping, the plot was engaging, the characters surprisingly more believable than a lot of live-action shows out there. And I even liked the show so much that I got this cute little car sticker for it. I love this show. And I could honestly make this video 30 minutes if I wanted to and explore every nook and cranny of this show, but I feel like that would do a disservice to those of you who haven't seen it yet. So rather than dissect everything about the show like I did with Monsters Inc., I'm instead going to talk about key moments in the show that made me fall in love with it, and at the same time realize why I had such a hard time getting into anime in the first place. Mob Psycho 100 is a show which centers around a boy named Mob, a middle schooler with insanely strong psychic powers. He's socially awkward, isn't good at expressing emotions, and his only friends are his brother, his parents, and a 27-year-old con artist named Reigen who tricks Mob into using his powers to exorcise spirits for profit, all under the idea that he is an all-powerful psychic and that Mob is his student. You know, standard middle school stuff. As weird of a plot as that might sound, from my very limited knowledge of anime, it's actually a pretty tame and generic premise for a show from Japan. A lot of animes take place in a school setting, and it's very typical for a protagonist to have some superpower that makes them more special than the people around them, even in Western culture. Mob Psycho is no exception, so needless to say, I didn't really expect this show to wow me that much at first glance. I was expecting some cool fight scenes and some funny moments, but not much more than that. However, the more I watched Mob Psycho, the more I noticed that there weren't that many fight scenes. Or at least not what you would expect when one uses the word fight. You see, Mob's psychic powers are so strong that fights in this show basically consist of Mob lifting a single finger to completely destroy whoever he's fighting. Now, in a show like One Punch Man, something like this is used for comedic effect. But in Mob Psycho, it's used to further Mob's development as a person. You see, Mob might be blessed with godlike psychic powers, but he views them as more of a burden than anything else. Despite having the power to do whatever he wants and potentially live an easy life, Mob chooses to not let his powers define who he is and instead chooses to focus his attention on becoming a better person and strengthening his weaknesses so that way he doesn't have to rely on his powers. There's a lot of messages in Mob Psycho, but the one that the show chooses to center around the most, and the one that stuck with me the most, was the theme of self-improvement. The idea that a main character of a show has problems and needs to work hard to become a better person is one that a lot of TV shows are afraid to tackle, but it's another thing to make that idea the main focus of your show. To my knowledge, the only other show to do this is BoJack Horseman, which does this very well, but from a more depressing angle than Mob Psycho does. And with less impressive animation, but whatever. The idea that people need to work hard to become the person that they want to be is such an important message, and yet, it's one that most movies and TV shows don't typically encourage. Most forms of media out there show their characters just magically getting what they want in life because if they really believe hard enough and want to accomplish their goal enough and claim they want to be the next Pokemon champion, that they can do it because they wanted it bad enough. It's one thing to have dreams, but it's another thing entirely to give all that you have to accomplish your dream. It's one thing to have goals, but it's another thing entirely to put forth that extra effort to accomplish your goal. And last but not least, it's one thing to want to be a good person, but it's another thing entirely to admit that you have faults and then work hard to improve yourself. The most important scene in the entire series, to me at least, is when Mob first meets his teacher Reigen, who, before meeting Mob, was on the brink of financial collapse due to him being a fraud without any real psychic powers. Reigen, seeing that Mob is emotionally distraught over not knowing how to control his powers at such a young age, tells Mob that he shouldn't think of his psychic powers as a burden, but as just another characteristic that makes Mob who he is. He ends up giving Mob some really good advice that sounds like a no-brainer when you see it at first, but is a message that is so powerful in its simplicity, and is one that I wish everyone could hear.
魅力の本質は人間味だ。いいやつになれ。以上。
With Reigen as his mentor, Mob eventually recognizes that the area in his life that he's always been the worst at and thus wants to improve is his physical strength and social skills. And as such, challenges himself by joining his school's body improvement club and attempting to hang out with more people his age. You wouldn't typically expect this, given that jocks in media are usually portrayed as jerks, while the outcasts are the ones made out to be the nice and talented ones. But Mob Psycho treats all of its characters like real people. And just like Reigen said, athleticism is just another trait that makes the Body Improvement Club who they are. But the true mark of their personality is kindness. As the series goes on and subplots and fight scenes and other random funny moments happen, we see that Mob grows as a person in both of these fields, not because he wanted to be stronger and more social, but because he put forth the effort and worked hard to become better in those fields. We see Mob become more social and happy because he recognized that he wasn't feeling that way and sought out methods to improve himself. To put it simply, he changed. Change is and always has been the main theme with Mob Psycho. But change in this show isn't just limited to Mob. Virtually every character in this show at some point realizes that they have flaws that they need to work through and tries to become better. Whether they're a villain with a superiority complex and need to be humbled by a healthy dose of Mob's powers, or they made a mistake and had to come to terms with it. Just like in real life, everyone in Mob Psycho has room to grow as a person. And on that note, I'd like to talk about the scene that made me fall in love with this show. The scene where Mob talks to Reigen on the bridge. Reigen and Mob have a fight in Season 2, wherein which Mob stops working for Reigen and leaves him completely alone. In that time, a scam is set up by one of Reigen's rivals to expose him as being a fraud, and when he is put on trial for his lying and scamming over the years, there's only one thing that Reigen can think of: his student Mob. So he apologizes on live TV to him in
成長したな、お前。
his own special way, and eventually walks down the street and runs into Mob on the bridge. He asks Mob if he knows what he truly is, to which Mob says, "I always have." I've always known that my master was a genuinely good guy. This moment hit me so hard because it taught me that if you want to make an impact on the world around you, the simplest thing that you can do is show kindness. Reigen didn't have to help Mob when he came into his office that day, but he did it because he had kindness in his heart. Kindness that permanently altered Mob's life, and as a result, altered Reigen's too. You know, I've been staring at this script for over an hour now, and when I get down to it, I can't exactly put into words why I'm not a fan of anime. There's nothing wrong with anime from a technical standpoint. I've tried multiple times to watch Naruto, One Piece, and other shows, but I just can't do it. But that's okay. Everyone has different tastes, and not everyone is gonna like the same stuff. When I get down to it, the reason I fell in love with Mob Psycho was due to its simplicity. Due to the fact that it tells the most relatable story that a show could possibly tell. The story of a person's journey to become a better person and how his resolve to achieve that goal positively impacts the people in the world around him. I might not like anime, but I will always love Mob Psycho 100. Alright, I'll make the COD Ghost video.